Israel was drowning in darkness. Corruption ruled the land. The throne of Israel was controlled by the legacy of King Ahab and the terrifying influence of Queen Jezebel. The worship of false gods had spread throughout the nation. The prophets of the Lord had been hunted down. Fear had replaced faith, and justice seemed lost. But heaven had not forgotten. Far from the royal palace, far from the schemes of kings and queens, a warrior was about to receive a calling that would change the course of Israel forever. His name was Jehu, a commander of armies, a fearless warrior, a man chosen by God for a mission unlike any other. His task would be dangerous, his path would be bloody, and his enemies would be powerful.
Yet there was something unusual about him. Something urgent. Something divine. The soldiers watched him carefully. The commanders exchanged uncertain glances. Without hesitation, the young man walked directly toward Jehu. "I seek Jehu, son of Nimshi," he said. Jehu stepped forward. "I am Jehu." The young prophet looked directly into his eyes. Then he spoke words that would change history. "Come with me, alone." Curious and cautious, Jehu followed. Away from the noise of the camp, away from the eyes of soldiers, away from the ears of commanders. Together they entered a small stone chamber. The room was silent. The sounds of the camp faded into the distance. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then the prophet reached beneath his robe. He withdrew a small horn filled with oil. Immediately, Jehu understood. This was no ordinary visit. This was a message from God. The atmosphere grew heavy with holy purpose. The prophet uncapped the horn, then slowly poured the oil upon Jehu's head. Golden streams flowed through his hair
and beard. The sacred oil glistened in the sunlight. And then the prophet spoke. His voice carried the authority of heaven itself. "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I anoint you king over the Lord's people Israel. You shall destroy the house of Ahab. You shall avenge the blood of my servants the prophets. You shall execute judgment upon Jezebel and all who have rebelled against me." The words struck Jehu like thunder. King? He had expected many things, but not this. Not a throne? Not a crown? Not a kingdom? Yet the Lord had chosen him. A soldier, a commander, a warrior. God had selected him to become his instrument of judgment. Images flashed through Jehu's mind. The prophets who had been murdered. The altars built to false gods. The innocent blood that had been shed. The years of corruption.
Ahead of them lay Jezreel, the royal city, the place where King Joram rested, the son of Ahab, the heir to a corrupt dynasty, and a man who had no idea that his world was about to change forever. Inside the royal palace, life appeared peaceful. Servants moved quietly through grand halls. Guards stood watch at every entrance. Physicians tended to King Joram's wounds from a recent battle. Though injured, the king believed he was safe, protected by walls, protected by soldiers, protected by power. But no wall can stop the plans of God. Far away, a watchman stood atop the city tower. His eyes scanned the horizon. At first, he noticed only a small cloud of dust. With every passing moment, it grew larger and larger and larger. The watchman's expression changed. Something was approaching, and it was moving fast.
Very fast. Immediately, he sent word to the king. "My lord," the messenger said, "a large group of riders approaches the city." Joram frowned. His heart stirred with concern. "Who are they?" he asked. But no one could yet answer. The riders were still too far away. Meanwhile, Jehu's chariot thundered across the land. His driving was famous throughout Israel. Fast, fearless, relentless. Many said no man drove a chariot like Jehu. And today he drove as though destiny itself pulled him forward. Back in Jezreel, King Joram ordered a messenger to ride out and meet the approaching force. The rider galloped across the open land until he reached Jehu. Raising his voice, he called out, "This is what the king asks. Do you come in peace?" Jehu barely looked at him. His eyes remained fixed on the road ahead. Then he answered, "What do you know about peace? Fall in behind me."
The messenger froze. There was authority in Jehu's voice, a power that could not be ignored. Without another word, the rider obeyed and joined Jehu's procession. Back at the city walls, the watchman continued watching. "The messenger reached them," he reported. King Joram nodded. And what was the response? The watchman hesitated. He has not returned. A feeling of unease settled over the palace. Joram immediately sent a second rider. Again the question was asked. Again, Jehu gave the same answer. "What do you know about peace? Fall in behind me." And once again, the messenger failed to return. Now fear began creeping into Joram's heart. Something was terribly wrong. The watchman strained his eyes toward the horizon. Then suddenly, recognition flashed across his face. He knew that driving style. Everyone in Israel knew that driving style. No one handled a chariot like Jehu. The watchman shouted from the tower, "I recognize him. It is Jehu, son of Nimshi. He drives like a
madman." Silence filled the palace. The name hit Joram like a thunderbolt. Jehu, the commander, the warrior, the man known throughout Israel for his courage and fierce determination. Why was he coming? And why were his messengers not returning? The answer was beginning to reveal itself. But Joram still refused to hide. He ordered his own chariot prepared. If Jehu was coming, he would meet him face to face. Soon, the king rode out from Jezreel. Beside him rode King Ahaziah of Judah. Together, the two rulers advanced toward the approaching force. The distance between them slowly disappeared. Dust swirled through the air. The wind blew across the open field. The tension was unbearable. Finally, the two sides stopped. For a moment, silence ruled the battlefield. Then King Joram called out, "Have you come in peace, Jehu?" The question echoed across the plain. Jehu stared directly at him. Years of corruption, years of idolatry, years of innocent bloodshed. All of it stood before him in the person of Ahab's son. Jehu's voice rang out with fierce conviction. "How can there be peace? As long as the idolatry and wickedness of your mother Jezebel continue throughout the land."
The words struck Joram with terrifying force. At that moment, he understood. This was not a friendly visit. This was judgment.
Fear flooded his face. He seized the reins, turned his chariot, and fled. "Treachery, Ahaziah! Treachery!" But Jehu had already reached for his bow. His hands were steady. His eyes were focused. Years of warfare had prepared him for this very moment. The horses raced forward. The kings fled. The wind roared. And Jehu pulled back the bowstring. An arrow waited to be released. An arrow that would change the future of Israel forever.
One arrow. One moment. One act of judgment. And the fate of a kingdom was changed forever. The house of Ahab had ruled Israel through fear, corruption, and idolatry. But now the word of the Lord was coming to pass. The judgment spoken years earlier by the prophets was unfolding before everyone's eyes, and Jehu was the instrument chosen to carry it out. As King Joram turned to flee, fear gripped his heart. He realized too late that Jehu had not come as a friend. He had come as God's appointed judge. The king pulled hard on the reins and urged his horses forward. Dust exploded beneath the wheels of his chariot. His heart pounded. His mind raced. But there was no escape from what had been decreed. Behind him, Jehu stood tall in his war chariot. His eyes never left his target. Years of battle had made his hands steady. Years of warfare had sharpened his aim. Without hesitation, he reached for his bow. The battlefield seemed to hold its breath. The wind swept across the open plain. And then Jehu released the arrow. It flew through the air with deadly precision, straight and true. The arrow struck King Joram. The king gasped. Pain surged through his body. His eyes widened in shock. The reins slipped from his hands. For a brief moment, disbelief filled his face. Then his strength faded. His body collapsed into the chariot. And the son of Ahab was no more. The prophecy had begun to unfold. Yet Jehu did not celebrate. He did not cheer. He did not raise his hands in victory. His mission was far from over.
Something terrible had happened. Everyone could feel it. The air itself seemed heavy with anticipation. Inside the royal palace, messengers hurried through the corridors. Their footsteps echoed against stone walls. Their faces were pale. Their voices trembled. They carried news that would shake the kingdom. When they finally stood before Queen Jezebel, fear filled the room. But the queen remained silent. She listened carefully. King Joram was dead. Jehu was approaching. The judgment she had long ignored was now standing at her gates. The servants watched her closely. The advisors waited nervously. Yet Jezebel showed no fear, no tears, no panic, no surrender. For years she had controlled kings. For years she had silenced opposition. For years she had ruled through intimidation and power, and she would not bow now. Slowly she rose from her throne. A cold determination settled over her face. If this would be her final day, she would face it as a queen, proud, defiant, unbroken. In her private chambers, servants hurried to prepare. Golden jewelry sparkled in candlelight. Fine fabrics were carefully arranged. Bronze mirrors reflected the glow of dancing flames. Standing before the mirror, Jezebel began to prepare herself. She arranged her hair with care. She painted her eyes. She dressed in her finest royal garments. Every movement was deliberate. Every detail was intentional. She refused to appear weak. She refused to appear defeated. If
Jehu wanted a confrontation, she would give him one. Meanwhile, outside the city walls, Jehu approached. His chariot rolled steadily toward Jezreel. The thunder of hooves echoed through the streets. Citizens moved aside as he entered the city gates. Some watched in fear, others watched in awe. Many had heard stories about Jehu, his courage, his fury, his determination. Now they were seeing him with their own eyes. Jehu never looked left, he never looked right. His focus remained fixed on one place, the palace. That was where his final enemy waited. As the chariot crossed the city, silence spread through the streets. The tension was unbearable. Everyone sensed that history was about to change. Above the courtyard, high within the palace walls, Queen Jezebel stepped toward a large window. The wind gently moved her hair. Her royal robes flowed around her. She looked down upon the approaching conqueror. And then their eyes met. Jehu below, Jezebel above. The warrior and the queen. The avenger and the woman who had corrupted a nation. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Neither looked away. Neither showed fear. The entire city appeared frozen. Then Jezebel spoke. Her voice echoed through the courtyard. Strong, proud, defiant. Have you come in peace, you traitor?
Murderer of your master. The words rang out across the palace grounds. Servants gasped. Guards shifted nervously. But Jehu remained unmoved. Her insults held no power over him. The days of fear were ending. The reign of Jezebel was reaching its final chapter. The prophecy spoken by Elijah years before was now standing at the door. And everyone present could feel it. The city fell silent. The soldiers waited. The servants held their breath. The queen stood at the window. And Jehu stared upward. The final confrontation was only moments away.
The moment had finally come. For years, Queen Jezebel had ruled through fear. Kings listened to her. Prophets were hunted because of her. And the people of Israel had been led deeper into idolatry under her influence. But now, the woman who once seemed untouchable stood face to face with judgment. High above the palace courtyard, Jezebel stood at her window. The evening wind moved gently through her hair. Golden jewelry sparkled against her royal robes. Her eyes were painted. Her appearance was flawless. Even as danger approached, she refused to show weakness. Below her stood Jehu, the warrior chosen by God. The man anointed to bring an end to the house of Ahab. His armor reflected the fading sunlight. His crimson cloak moved with the wind. His eyes remained fixed on the queen. Neither looked away. Neither showed fear. The entire city seemed to hold its breath. Soldiers stood motionless. Servants
watched from the shadows. The silence was almost unbearable. Then Jezebel broke it. Her voice rang out across the courtyard. Cold, sharp, mocking. Have you come in peace, you traitor? The queen's words echoed against the palace walls. She still believed she could intimidate her enemies. She still believed her power remained. But Jehu was unmoved. The insults meant nothing. The threats meant nothing. The
time for words had passed. Years earlier, the prophet Elijah had spoken God's judgment against Jezebel. Many had heard the prophecy. Many had wondered if it would ever happen. Now that prophecy stood on the edge of fulfillment. Jehu stepped forward. His voice thundered through the courtyard. "Who is on my side?" Silence. No one answered. The queen stood proudly at the window. The servants glanced nervously at one another. Then Jehu shouted again, "Who is on my side?" This time, movement appeared beside Jezebel. 2 palace eunuchs stepped forward. Then a third. For years they had served within the palace. For years they had witnessed the queen's cruelty. For years they had watched fear dominate every corner of the kingdom. And now they faced a choice. Remain loyal to a fallen ruler, or stand with the king God had appointed. Slowly, they looked down toward Jehu. Their decision had been made. Jehu raised his hand. His eyes never left the queen. Then he gave a single command. "Throw her down." The words struck the courtyard like thunder.
For a moment, everything stood still. Jezebel turned toward the eunuchs. Shock flashed across her face. Not fear, disbelief. The powerful queen could not imagine being betrayed by her own servants. But it was already too late. The men moved forward. They seized her. Jezebel struggled against them. Her royal robes twisted as she fought. Her voice echoed through the palace chambers. But her authority was gone. The servants who once obeyed her every command now held her fate in their hands. And then they pushed. Time seemed to slow. The queen fell from the palace window. Her robes billowed through the air. The sunlight reflected from her golden jewelry. Gasps rose from the crowd below. Soldiers stared in stunned silence. Servants covered their mouths. The woman who had ruled through fear was falling. The woman who had corrupted a nation was falling. The woman who believed she would never be challenged was falling. And with her, an era of wickedness was coming to an end. The courtyard fell silent. No cheers, no celebration. Only the sound of the wind moving through the city. Jehu remained beside his chariot. His expression revealed no pride, no joy, only determination. This was never about personal revenge. This was about obedience. This was about justice. This was about fulfilling the word of the Lord. The prophecy spoken years before had come to pass. The reign of Jezebel was over. But Jehu knew his work was not finished. The queen was gone, yet the corruption she had spread still lingered throughout Israel. The battle for the nation's soul was far from over. As the sun disappeared behind the horizon, darkness settled over Jezreel. And the people understood something they would never forget. Power does not last forever. Pride cannot stand against God's judgment. And no throne is higher than the authority of the Lord. The fall of Jezebel marked the end of one chapter. But for Jehu, the greatest part of his mission was only beginning.
Battle was over. The house of Ahab had fallen. Jezebel was gone. The prophets of Baal had been removed. And across Israel, people whispered the name of Jehu, the warrior king, the man who had carried out the judgment of God.
For years, Jehu ruled from Samaria. The kingdom that had once been poisoned by corruption and idolatry now stood under a new king. The people remembered his victories. They remembered the thunder of his chariot, the fearless charge into Jezreel, the fall of King Joram, the destruction of Jezebel, and the cleansing of Baal worship from the land. At first, it seemed as though Israel had finally been set free. Peace slowly returned. Markets reopened. Farmers worked their fields. Children played in the streets once again. The fear that had gripped the nation began to fade. But as the years passed, something changed. The fire that once burned so fiercely within Jehu began to grow dim. The king who had boldly obeyed God's command started making compromises. Though he destroyed Baal worship, he refused to remove the golden calves at Bethel and Dan, the same idols that had led Israel away from God for generations. Little by little, Jehu began to tolerate what he should have destroyed.
And compromise slowly entered the kingdom once again. The Lord had used Jehu to bring judgment, but judgment alone could not change people's hearts. Israel still needed true devotion to God. Inside the royal palace, the weight of kingship grew heavier each year. Jehu was no longer the young commander racing across battlefields. His beard had turned grey. The scars of war covered his body. The strength that once made nations tremble was fading. And for the first time, the mighty warrior found himself fighting a battle he could not win. Time. Many nights, Jehu stood alone on the palace balcony, looking out across Samaria, watching the lights flicker in the distance, listening to the sounds of the city he ruled, and remembering. Remembering the day a prophet poured oil upon his head, remembering the moment God called him, remembering the purpose that once burned in his heart. Yet deep inside, he knew he had not fully followed the Lord. The victories remained, but so did the compromises. And those compromises cast long shadows over his legacy. As Jehu grew older, his body weakened. The years of war and leadership had taken their toll. His steps became slower, his voice softer, his strength diminished. Eventually, a great illness came upon him. The once mighty king could no longer leave his bed. The palace halls grew quiet. Servants moved in hushed whispers. Soldiers stood watch outside his chamber. Nobles gathered anxiously. Everyone knew the end was near. The warrior king who had changed the course of Israel's history was approaching. The warrior king who would change the course of Israel's history was approaching his final battle. One evening, as the sun sank beyond the hills of Samaria, golden light filled the room. Jehu lay silently upon his bed, his breathing slow, his eyes fixed toward the window. Outside, life continued. Children laughed in distant streets, merchants closed their shops, families gathered for the evening meal. The kingdom moved forward. But inside the palace, a chapter of history was coming to an end. Jehu reflected upon his life. The victories, the failures, the triumphs, the regrets. He remembered God's mercy. He remembered God's calling. And perhaps, for the first time in many years, he saw his life clearly. Not as a king, not as a conqueror, but simply as a man standing before his Creator. A man who had accomplished great things, yet had also fallen short. The room grew darker. The
shadows lengthened, and Jehu whispered a final prayer. A prayer only God could hear. Then the warrior closed his eyes and breathed his last breath.
Silence filled the chamber. King Jehu was dead. News spread quickly through Samaria. The people mourned. Some remembered him as a hero. Others remembered his severity. But none could deny that he had changed the nation forever. The king who destroyed the house of Ahab, the king who brought down Jezebel, the king who shattered the power of Baal, was gone. Jehu was buried among the kings of Israel, and his son Jehoahaz ascended to the throne. Yet the legacy of Jehu would endure for generations. His story became both a testimony and a warning. A testimony of courage, a testimony of obedience, a testimony that God can use ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary purposes. But also a warning that starting well is not enough, that zeal without lasting faithfulness can lead to compromise, and that even the strongest leaders must continually walk with God. Jehu's life teaches us that victory is not merely defeating enemies. True victory is remaining faithful until the very end. His name would echo through history, not only as a warrior, not only as a king, but as a man chosen by God to fulfill a divine mission. And though his story ended in the royal tombs of Samaria, its lessons continue to speak today. Because every generation faces the same choice: to follow God completely or to settle for compromise. The fall of Jezebel marked the end of one evil reign. But the story of Jehu reminds us that the greatest battle is not against enemies outside us. It is the battle within our own hearts. And that battle is one that every person must face.